Let's talk a little bit about the art of the bit, because I like what makes a great bit. Like, how do you know when a bit has, yeah, like what
Yeah.
makes a good bit in general?
Look, I think that an audience will always tell you what a great bit is too. You hear a reaction. You know, I'm a big believer in play play for you. You're the audience, right? If it makes you laugh, it probably will make somebody else laugh. Back to what you said earlier about like, hurt people, but like the pain is universal, right? But if you're laughing, if you're having fun, people are gonna find that infectious. I think when you're trying to like land a joke, it feels inauthentic. One of the first things I ever saw that was so great when I moved out to LA is I saw Patton Oswalt talk about Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, and I watched him break down this movie. He's like, I just saw this movie. Let me tell you what this is about. And I was like, oh my God, this is the funniest thing I've ever saw. And the way he told it, it felt like he was saying it for the first time. I saw him 2 nights later doing the same exact material. Right. And I was like, oh, I felt like a doofus. I've seen stand up my whole life. Right. I wasn't new to stand up, but that kind of thing is like making people feel like it's an organic moment. So for me, audiences will tell you what a good bit is. People will tell you what a good bit is, but it's often it's reading the room. It's like, all right, I know I'm on a thing. If I'll do things with June or Jason on the podcast, and if I see them laughing, I'll lean into it, right? If I hear the audience laughing, I'll lean into it. So and so to me, it's like I think that there's like two levels of doing any sort of comedy. One is like you test it out. Is this something? Oh yeah, I like that. How about this? And you kind of build on it, and it's a little bit like it's like trying to get like a shy, like it's like you're like a shy dog. You're coming in, you're like, hey, what's up here? Okay, I'm coming. You're getting more and more comfortable as you go in, and sometimes you'll do something. People are like, what? I mean, I have a whole thing. I'm like, I think the funniest thing is never translates to anybody, but I think it's funny. It's not worked, and I have to learn not to never to ever do it again. But I think it's such a funny bit. Like, you ever see those M&M's commercials where it's like the two talking M&M's,
Yeah.
and I'm like, but they're standing in front of a bowl of other M&Ms that are not that don't have feet, that don't have eyes. And I'm like, what's going on there? Is that like, are those aborted M&Ms? Are those dead M&Ms? Like what? And I'm just always trying to break down like what this logic of this world is where the M&Ms are watching people eat handfuls of M&Ms in the background. I'm like, what is and it's like I can't make that into a bit. If I tell it to you, like this is the best way it ever works. Is like if I can explain it where I really like lay it out like that. But it's like I don't know what makes me laugh about that. But there's some bits like I wrote a bit for Human Giant that I loved, which is a sketch show I did with Aziz Ansari and Rob Hubel. Um, and it was the idea like there's like a genie, like you get a magical genie, and you rub the genie, and the premise of the sketch I wrote was, oh, I got this genie, but he's broken. It just never worked. Like I bought it from the store and the genie never works. And it's like I asked for a hat and he gets me a cat, whatever it is. And we couldn't really break down that thing of like, oh yeah, it's like I talked about it like on NordiTrack or something. It's like, oh, I bought this genie head. It just but I can't use it anymore. And but because of that idea, Eric, oh okay, I guess sure. And then it became the sketch called Meth Genie, where I got a genie, but he became addicted to meth. And so it was like basically I had like a crackhead genie, and the genie was doing all this weird shit around the house. And then that became like, and that's kind of, I think that's the fun of the collaboration of it all. It's like, all right, I have an idea for a bit, but when you work with other people, they can kind of make it better too.
Yeah, and even with the Eminem, it's always funny when people bring the unconscious or what we might have thought of but never really
Yeah,
verbalize it to the conscious mind or to the audience.
yeah.
That's what always makes it funny too.
Yeah, and I think part of it's like I think one of the things about it that's fun and what I always say to people is like, don't stop. If you are a performer, you can't stop performing and you can't stop seeking out new stuff. You might feel like the culture has passed you by. You might feel like, oh, I don't know if this is hip or funny, but you got to get up there. And one of the things I love about still performing, pretty much weekly, is I'm always playing myself in front of an audience, right? And so yeah, sometimes I'll eat shit, sometimes I won't. But it's like it's trying, and it's like, but the minute you get precious about trying is the minute that I think you start to lose that edge and that spark, because I think all of comedy, all of doing a good bit is testing out a lot of bits and going, oh, is this something? A writer's room. It's like you're in a writer. What about this? What about this? What about this? And that's why I think it's so important in a writer's room to go back to that theory of yes anding. Let's say
Yeah.
yes and, not no but. Like when you start to say no, that thing won't work because X, Y, and Z. It's like no, no. Like there's a rule that the Hanna-Barbera had. That you could never say no to any of the cartoon ideas. They knew that the best ideas would rise to the top, and the bad ideas would kind of just go away. And we spend so much time saying no. Like let those moments of pure creativity just be yes, and make somebody's idea better. And if you make somebody's idea better, you're gonna feel better at the end of the day instead of just being like, oh, we got nothing. It's like, yeah, because you didn't every time you're like, let's drive down this road, you drive down that road for half a mile and go, oh, let's turn back. It's like, well, you're never gonna get anywhere. You're just gonna keep on going back and forth, and it's gonna be, and you're never gonna move forward.
Yeah, speaking of performance, do you have a favorite memory from those UCB days? And didn't you like work with Amy Poehler and a lot of different people
Oh
coming up?
yeah. So I came up in the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. The UCB was Amy Poehler, Matt Besser, Matt Walsh, and Ian Roberts. And now, when they first started performing in New York City, it was on a fifth floor walk up on 17th Street in New York City above an old hardware store, right? And they were in a theater that probably sat 50 people, and they would do an improv show. And the improv show was amazing. It blew my mind. It's what got me into doing like this long form improv. And what I didn't realize at the time was, yes, I was watching those UCB4. They were not famous,
Yeah.
but who was next to them? Oh, people like Adam McKay and Tina Fey and Rachel Dratch and people like some of the biggest writers even too. Like you start to see all these amazing people just performing and playing and having fun. I think culturally too, that's coming back in a major way. Like when you talk about like escape rooms and things like that, people want to be in interactive environments. But not to get off topic, there were so many amazing moments in those early days of UCB, and I think a lot of it was, well, I can bring up one that I thought was really fun for me. I used to do this fake talk show called Talk Show, where I used to play like an Ed McMahon character called J. Montgomery Scott. And we would book real guests, like a real talk show. And I remember we booked Tenacious D. This may even be in
Wow.
the book. We booked Tenacious D to be in the show, but we didn't tell anybody. And then all of a sudden, we're like, all right, our first guest tonight, Tenacious D. And they were at the point where Tenacious D was like they were
Yeah.
exploding. Like they were playing large venues, but they were in UCB and people just saw it. And that was like a magical night. Like Mike Myers jumped up on stage with us. Robin Williams would jump up on stage, right? Right. You would get these moments where it was New York, it was hip, it was cool, and people just wanted to play. And that to me, like there's so many moments. And at one point someone will write a history of UCB. And what I was trying to do in my chapter when I talk about UCB was kind of explore a little bit of it. But I realized also my experience of UCB is so singular to me. One of the cool things about UCB was there were so many performers having very individual experiences, but the one thing that brings us all together was we were a place where cool things were happening with the funniest people in the city. And for that like period of 5 years, it was this explosion of talent and shows and just performances that you would like that are burned in my brain and may not even translate to be the funniest things, but it's the hardest I've ever laughed. I watched a sketch with two people basically just saying the name Jay Leno for 4 minutes. And it's the hardest I've ever laughed in my entire life. I like it, like right, like, but it's like it's just being there and feeling like you've seen something so wholly unique.
It's so interesting when you read biographies because everybody always had, or at least when you read certain biographies, people always have these weird run-ins with unique people at certain times, like before they've gotten big, and
Yeah,
you kind of use that as like a horizontal collaboration as you continue to grow. So all those
yeah,
people you still were working with too.
yeah. That's one of the best things about my back. Well, one of the best things about improv is you're building together, right? So stand up is very different. Like you're up on stage, you can go on the road by yourself. You don't need anybody else. I need other people to improvise with. I want to have those people. So it is a collective of people where I think in comedy, I know, like in my type of comedy, not stand up, but in my world of comedy, I think I would say I know about 85% of the people currently in comedy because we're all 1 degree of separation away from each other. It was actually really interesting because I did a show that Ben Stiller produced. We did it to raise money for Haiti. It was about like we just did a night called 100, the night of 140 tweets. We had this is back when Twitter was first popular. We had a bunch of people come out on stage and read one tweet each. And we had like everybody from Will Ferrell to Demi Moore and this wild grouping of people. But we had 140 performers. And I remember it was interesting because we had the cast of Always Sunny there, and I love those guys, and I knew them from doing the league, but they didn't know anyone in the room because they kind of came up outside of the comedy world. They're doing something so incredibly funny, but they're not like in the comedy world, and that kind of thing is so rare. I would say that every major comedy show, it has the DNA in this like Second City UCB Improv Olympic, Groundlings world that we all kind of traverse in. And it's like I may not know that person 100%, but I'm good friends with one of their good friends, right? So it's like it's only a phone call away, which I think also allows us not to hire people who are assholes, right? Because like, how is that person? Oh, they're great. Okay, great.
Exactly. If you enjoyed that clip, make sure you head over to www.bookupapp.com to download our app so you can connect with your favorite bookish content creators, start conversations, and start your own book club.